Welcome back to my conversational series, AI in the Wild. Should it be tamed or run free? I'm excited to welcome Stephanie Miller, adjunct faculty, Department of Security and Technology at Bowie State University, and a Vice President of Data and Impact at Axim Collaborative. Axim Collaborative creates and supports partnerships that advance digital education transformation to help students that are historically marginalized and underserved by the educational system to improve their education and educational and economic outcomes. Prior to joining Axim Collaborative, Stephanie served as project director for the Civil Rights Data Collection Initiative for the U.S. Department of Education, and in addition to being an adjunct professor at Bowie State University Department of Security and Technology, Stephanie also teaches data-driven insights at Temple University. It's a great pleasure, Stephanie, to have you join me in this third of this four-part series.
Thank you for having me.
So, Stephanie, maybe one of the things we can talk about is just tell me more about Axim Collaborative in your role. What is Axim Collaborative looking at when we talk about using data and AI to make a positive impact on students' lives?
Yeah, thank you. So I've been part of Axim Collaborative since January when I joined. And I am responsible for shaping and driving how the organization and our partners use data and evaluation and insights to inform our work and drive impact. Axim's mission is to find, fund, and foster partnerships that is oriented around students from underserved communities. And part of what we're doing is developing AI solutions and other digital technologies to really help students along their learning pathways, to persist through college, to graduate, and to ultimately find good jobs. And so we partner with a range of institutions across the country to support new digital and education practices that engage underserved students in a positive way.
Well, I mean, that's excellent. I mean, it's about time, I think, right, in education that we leverage, all the data that's around us and AI tools, right, to kind of personalize and focus on, where education might be deficient. I'm excited to hear more because, we've heard a lot about AI in education, right? Mm-hmm. And I've been following specifically generative AI, and we all hear these see in the news about generative AI being used to write students' essays. And then maybe that's the sort of the negative view of what AI use in education. But there's lots of other use cases where AI and the data that's available to AI can really benefit. I'd love to hear more specifically around the types of AI they use, but also, what's your thoughts about generative AI? It's such a kind of a little bit of a controversial topic in education. How can generative AI be kind of focused to help the underserved students and institutions?
Right. So my thoughts about generative AI are really informed by my teaching at Bowie State University. And so I understand that the field is evolving rapidly, and we are trying to figure out, as a professor, I'm trying to figure out how to incorporate it into the classroom. And so because I'm in the Department of Security and Technology, on the one hand, I want my students to figure out how to incorporate into their learning. But on the other hand, I'm also trying to teach them responsible concepts because many of them want to do this work once they graduate. And so I'm also concerned about encouraging diversity in this field because I know the percentage of students of color that go into data science and feels like it are very, very low. So I'm part of that system to help boost students of color to get into the field. But I think generative AI can have a positive impact on students and outcomes, especially if we use it in a responsible and transparent way. And I think that I try to use it to amplify the work that I do in the classroom. For instance, I'm teaching a senior level data science course this semester. And I had a student come to me with a question about, he's using a national data set, and he had questions for me about survey methodologies that I just simply could not answer. And I told him, you have to give me some time to look into it. And he said, Dr. Miller, can I use ChatGPT to answer this question? I said, absolutely. Share with me what you get. And he went, he did the research, he used critical thinking to ask the right questions of the technology, and he was able to figure it out. And we were able to collaborate together to figure out the best approach to his project. So I think AI can be used to help students think through difficult projects, to help improve their writing, to help them prepare presentations and proofread. So I think that there are definitely some benefits to generative AI for sure.
Yeah, no, well, and you give a great example, right? The student that needs to answer a question, and they can be empowered, right? They can ask their questions, and then I guess what we have to do from an educational perspective, right, is as you mentioned, teach that critical thinking, right? Like what gets back may not be right, it could be right. Let's try to substantiate. Let's get additional information. Does it make logical sense? And that critical sort of questioning of what comes back, right, will help with the inevitable sort of bias that occurs in these generative AI models, or the hallucinations, or other aspects. And so I do really like the example of that sort of empowerment and that independence, because from my own career, that's been and as a student, right, has been really important that I can go and back when I was a kid, right, I had to go to the library, and I was constrained by the quality of the library, right.
Absolutely.
Here, you have access to to your ability to prompt and to ask the questions, right? And those with initiative can leverage that tool.
I also think, if we think about generative AI in terms of equity, we have students that simply don't have the resources to go to a tutor, or don't have the human capital to know how to ask their advisors the right kind of question. And so what if we could use generative AI to sort of bridge that gap for underserved students, or students who need it the most? And I think as we continue to develop this technology, we should think about equity first, right? How can our most vulnerable students really benefit from this technology, which will then benefit everyone?
I love the use case, and frankly, you also had the other aspect of this where a lot of students are too shy to ask the question, right? They're too embarrassed, right? And
Absolutely.
you can't be embarrassed asking a chat GPT, right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
That's great. All right. Well, let's then talk a little bit about something that you and I partnered on, and it's been a tremendous pleasure. And that's the FICO Educational Analytics Challenge, right? Where you serve the role as an advisor to student participants at Bowie State University, and really helped facilitate that. And I just really appreciate that partnership. And for those that are listening to our conversation here about AI and whether it should be tamed or run wild, and particularly in the area of education, right? The FICO Educational Challenge this year was focused on studying Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data, and building AI models and studying the data where students would detect bias, and they would provide recommendations on how to reduce it, right? So it was, I think, a really great project to kind of allow students real life access to the models that are, to the data, right, that is available in certain use cases, and then, challenges with building these models. And, I was really just curious, right, what were your thoughts, right? And maybe two questions here, right? The first is maybe a personal question, right? Because, you have a great background. I mean, it's a wonderful sort of background. But what's interesting, and I'll share with everyone, is that you have a master's degree in educational foundations, and you have a PhD in urban education and leadership. So education is so key to probably your ethos, right? And I see that in working with you. I was curious, before we get to the students who are just starting their lives and their careers, obviously you have a tremendous sort of educational background. What prompted you to really focus on getting your data science certificates and really focusing, to use data science as an enabler for your career?
So I think when I was an undergrad, I had an adult intervene in my life. I was part of a program called the Ronald McNair Program that helps prepare students from underserved communities for graduate school. And it was through that program that I caught the research and data bug. That's where it all started. And that program really changed the trajectory of my career. And ever since that, I participated in that program, I've been passionate about education and really using data to help drive insights. And so I realized, as you know, I've been doing the statistics work, I've been doing the research, and I realized that I wanted to learn more about data science to one, become a better professional, to really learn how to use data visualization in my work and use data science to tell good stories. And then on the other hand, I wanted to be a better teacher and a better mentor for my students. Getting that certificate in data science really helped me be able to talk to them about all the possibilities that are in data science, help them think about how predictive analytics really influences our life, how to use Python and why it's important. And so I wanted to know all these things so that I could help my students be competitive in this field.
Well, that's great. And frankly, right, I mean, we've seen it with generative AI, we've seen it before, right? Like ever since essentially, COVID was a big sort of jumpstart, right? It jumpstarted this sort of digital sort of revolution where more and more data was becoming digitized, right? And with all that data being digitized, we have more data than ever, right? But humans, we really struggle with that data, right? But with AI and data science, you can boil it down into, answer hypotheses, back it with data, back it with statistics, and then work with those these sort of models to make make judgments about it. And I think it's an essential skill, and I'm glad that you took that step because it's something that our students that are in college today absolutely have to be proficient in, right? I mean, it's going to be the same as English and other sort of topics, right? And we talk about math, but we those that can work with data, those that are not intimidated by building a model or understanding the outcome of a model, right, is going to be part of essentially what work will look like and what life will work like. Where we will be collaborating with the AI, right? And so, being able to enable students that experience, I think, is super important. And moreover, right, to allow them to participate in it, right? There's so many models out there already that impact our lives, and so understanding how they're built, understanding whether they're responsible, understanding the pitfalls back and forth with bias or safety or stability, all really important because these models make decisions about us. Yeah,
absolutely.
So then let's look at the students in that educational program, right? We finished that last in the fall semester, I just, first of all, I was tremendously impressed by all the students. It was just a great honor to meet them, and it's a great honor to track them and understand, the internships they're getting. These are super bright STEM students, really motivated students, and a great pleasure. And one of the things that I always talk about, and I try to make sure that's applied in the work that we do here at FICO, is that we need to focus on diversity, right? And I loved understanding the way they were looking at the data science problem and the insights they had and how they kind of organized. And I also liked how they compared with each other, right? I mean, there's not one solution, right? There's a number of solutions, and to see how different people approach it. Sometimes we call it data science artistry, right? So, what were your observations? Watching them kind of work through it, and what do you think they came away with?
Yeah, so Scott, I think my students learned a bunch of soft skills and hard skills. In terms of soft skills, they learned about working in a team and what it means when folks have different approaches to solve a problem, and how do you reach agreement when you're working in a team. They definitely boost their critical thinking skills. And I know the majority of my students after that project were like, we're going to go to graduate school after we graduate. And I've been helping several of them with their applications and thinking about which programs that they need to consider. So that was great for me. In terms of hard skills and things like that, I think my students connected to the work in a way that I just didn't really anticipate. They learned that data and bias in data just goes beyond race and gender, and how bias is inherent in a whole lot of different kind of data, just not those ones that are obvious. And how do you think through those problems? They also learn that data is messy, and really thinking critically about how to handle some of those data challenges when you are wrangling data and things like that. They learned that algorithmic bias is a real thing. And they wanted, we had a lot of conversations about what additional data we needed in order to better train the model that we had. Python, I think Python is this thing that, they're required to learn, but they got to really work with it in a real way. Before, where in my class, they just get examples and we come up with projects. But this was a real thing that they were doing for a real organization that actually does this work and use it. They also really understood why diversity in this field matters. Your FICO mentors that we had, they were wonderful. And being able to communicate with them and sort of challenge their ideas in the back and forth was amazing for them.
That's so nice to hear. And it's exceeded my expectations for what I wanted to see from the program so far, and with Bowie State in particular, right? And I think one of the things that I think from my perspective that I really enjoy, right, is just we didn't we didn't sugarcoat it, and we didn't make a toy problem, right? And so like that struggling with that real life data and the size of it and the expense of it, and allowing it to be pretty unstructured, right? Go find where the bias is, go figure out how to remediate it. I think was really great to see, how they approach those problems. And I do like the way that you talk about, soft versus hard, right? I mean, we sometimes forget, right, that working in teams and getting that sort of collaboration and consensus and understanding is part of this lifelong education, right? Like I'm in at FICO now 25 years. Every single day I'm learning something new. I'm being inspired. I'm trying something different, right? And I think this is one of the, if data science could be equated to a treasure, I mean, this is one of the treasures because, there's always questions to ask. There's always ways to evolve the solution. And then frankly, right, some of these challenges like the bias in the data will always be biased. That the goal is to not build bias models or to move towards a better set of outcomes, right? And unfortunately, right, a lot of these models could propagate bias, and I think that sort of visibility to like just how important this field is, and I'm just tickled, completely tickled that many of them are talking about going to graduate school, because this is exactly what I would love to see, right? For them to now say, okay, I'm pretty passionate about this area. I want to learn more, and then bringing those impacts, because we do have in data science, as you mentioned early on in the conversation, some groups are very not well represented, and that's a problem. That's a huge problem. So
absolutely,
that's great. Okay, well, again, thank you for that. I mean, that was just tremendous, and I do hope we can count on Bowie State to join us next year. Right, we're going to do cross problems, so I would love to continue that. So I think so far, right, we've kind of established that AI and data science, right, it's just critical for education. I mean, I love the conversations about some of the thinking you're doing with Axim Collaborative around enabling students and up-leveling them and ensuring that every student has a similar sort of access to materials, right? Same way we would insist that everyone has access to the internet, we have to have access to the same types of materials so they can advance to be the people that they're supposed to become, right? And they have that access. So that's great. And then we have let's have the practitioner, sort of view, like, let's build models that impact people and understand how hard it is. So we have lots of examples, and I think what's great about the work that you do, right? And this is a big part of your education, and also your focus is understanding that this next generation, empowering them to be participating in this is super important for us. So I'm going to ask the question, although I might know the answer already, but let's answer the question from your perspective. Should AI be allowed to run wild, used freely in education, or be tamed with strong guidelines and rules?
Mhm. I think we have to find the right balance. My goal is, so I'm very open with my students, like, you're going to use it, I know, but I want to help you use it in a responsible way that incorporates critical thinking and also advances whatever project or goal you have. I also think there's still a lot we need to evaluate and learn about this field, right? I would like to figure out a way to measure outcomes and the impact. Part of what I'm doing at Axim of using AI to help students persist and get through graduation. So I can't answer that question directly. I, like I said, I think we need to find the balance, but I think AI is going to become increasingly important in the classroom, not only to help students learn, but also to help prepare them for the workplace as jobs and businesses continue to incorporate this technology in their processes as well.
Well, Stephanie, thank you for that. I think it's a very balanced and measured answer, actually. I was thinking when you were talking about your answer, I was thinking, well, I spent a whole lot of time educating, executives and heads of data science on the same topics, right? So I think it's it's for education, but it's also the same critical thinking and don't blindly trust technology is something that I routinely talk to practitioners about. And I love that this could be a game-changing sort of tool, right? And I think a lot of times what I like to talk about one of my, one of the people that I admire a lot, his name's George Fox, and he's deceased, right? But he had this sort of, lots of wonderful quotes, but, one of them is like, all models are wrong, but some are useful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we have that mentality about what using tools, right, we can understand that these sort of technologies are faulty, but very often wonderful tools, right? Absolutely. Tools that can enable us to be, educated differently, to see the world differently. And I think that critical thinking, and that's frankly, right, I guess that's what we're trying to do as educators, right? We're trying to educate our students to think critically, to be creative, right? Not to become dependent. This shouldn't be a tool. And I think, I'm going to be very much following, the developments that you have with Axim Collaborative, but also just I look forward to continue to work with you, because I think finding ways to really improve the education, particularly of minorities and underrepresented groups, is critically important here in the U.S. and all over the world, right? And if we can find a way to kind of balance the potential risk with the fact that it can really empower, I think it is a wonderful thing for education. So
absolutely.
Well, thank you again, Stephanie. I appreciate your mission. I appreciate your partnership and collaboration, and thanks for sharing your thoughts about whether AI should run free or be tamed. Right?
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.